with that, let me introduce Marsha Friedman. She is a highly experienced trainer, coach, and public speaker in the field of public speaking. Her company is Express Yourself Communications, and her tagline is changing the world one presentation at a time. Now, I met Marsha probably about 7 or 8 years ago when I was the head of education at Morse Life Health System. She facilitated a powerful presentation program for my staff of 36 managers and leaders. She did an amazing job. It was fantastic. She worked particularly well helping all of our participants overcome fears and limited experience. And again, we had people in there who had zero experience and were petrified of public speaking. Now, let me tell you, they had to present their projects to the entire senior leadership team. So if you can imagine having to stand in front of a lot of the CEO, the CFO, the COO, and all the senior VPs, it was about 7 people in all. These folks were scared, and she helped them get over their fears and become excellent public speakers in a matter of just a couple of days. It was pretty amazing. Marsha also works with corporate clients such as American Express, and she works with individuals to help them come across as more confident, charismatic, and convincing. So make sure you stay on the call until the end, because Marsha has a few special offers, and then she'll take any additional questions. So stay on. I do want to let you know we are recording the event, and we will be able to send that out to you later, but please stay until the end because there are some special offers at the end that you'll only get through this live session. So with that, let's get on with the show. Marsha, take it away.
Thank you, Jimmy. And it's wonderful to see 32 people on the call today. I recognize some of my friends, mentors, current clients, former clients, and welcome to all of those of you who are new with me and my business. I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day today. Whether you're speaking to a group of 3 or 300, whether it's virtual or live, whether it's an informal conversation or a formal presentation, hopefully you'll take away some valuable tips from this workshop today. And anytime, as Jimmy said, please make sure you put comments or questions as we go along, but keep those comments as we go along related to the subject there. We'll take those general questions a little bit later on. Okay, so let's begin. Again, welcome to 10 mistakes speakers make and how to avoid them. We want to avoid the mistakes, not the speakers. All right, a little bit of humor there. Mistake number 1, the fear of public speaking. All right, so what I'd like you to do is rate yourself in the chat on your level of fear related to public speaking. 1 would be the lowest. I have no fear at all. 10, I'm totally freaked out. So go ahead and put your number in the chat and Jimmy will start to read them off to me. While I admit Christian.
I've got 3, 2, 8, 9, 1, 5, 8, 4, 1. We've got all levels. 5. Steve says 3. Yona says 5. Gloria says 8.
8. Wow.
I got to go back and see who that 9 was.
Oh,
who put a 9 in there? Kimberly put a 9.
You don't have to say the name. That's okay.
Everybody saw it anyway.
There's no wrong answer here. There really isn't. Okay, great. Well, think about that. If you have what you consider to be a fear of public speaking, what are some opportunities that perhaps you have passed up because of it? As an example, if I'm a middle level manager and I'm offered a promotion to be a senior level manager, I know now I will have to present. I'll have to manage my team. I may not apply for that position just because I know I'll be put in the spotlight. When we think of it on a personal nature, let's say I have kids in school. Now my kids are grown, of course, I've got grandkids, but right now a lot of parents are going to PTA meetings and speaking up. What if you had a really strong opinion on something, yet you couched? You didn't want to raise your hand and speak because you felt that you had a fear of speaking. Well, guess what, guys? There's really no such thing as the fear of public speaking. My opinion is it's the fear of failure and rejection. After all, we're speaking all the time. So it's not the fear of speaking. We are a little bit more concerned with whether or not we get approval. Let's say we need to go in to speak to our superiors about additional funding for a project. We're afraid that we won't get it. What if you want to present a new idea to your team for how to manage the project you're working on? You may have the fear that they'll laugh at you or think it was a stupid idea. So too many people are held back by this supposed fear. So again, I want you to rethink it as more of a fear of failure and rejection. What can we do to counteract that feeling? What I suggest you do is think about all the tough questions you could be asked. Think about what people may object to in your presentation, and you need to do this before you even start writing it. This way, we're anticipating any possible problems, and now we're better prepared. When you can do that, you'll have more of a feeling of control, you'll do a better job, and your energy will be much better as well. By the way, I encourage you to grab a piece of paper and pen and take some notes. All right, so that was mistake number one, fear of speaking. And it's funny, years ago, they used to have that listed as the number one fear in the book of lists. So I kid around when somebody mentions that. And I say, I think that's been replaced with the fear of losing your cell phone. Can everybody relate to that one, right? I think we all fear that, right? How are we going to function without that cell phone? All right, mistake number two is having a big ego. And the problem with having a big ego is you might, and you fill in those letters, I'm not going to say that word, S blank blank K, where you believe you excel. Over the years, I've seen people have fancy degrees from, let's say, the Wharton School of Business, from Princeton. They may have a really great position in their corporation, and somehow they think they can get by with that and not prepare. The problem is, if you're not prepared, maybe you're too slick or have too big an ego, you're not going to come across as being fully present or authentic. So write down that word authentic. Authenticity is something that audiences want more than ever. We have a strong social need for survival to connect with other people. And if you don't come across as really caring about the audience, you're not fully present, whatever you say doesn't really matter. You will not resonate with your audience members. Years ago, I attended a human resources event. There were about 100 people there, and the speaker was China Gorman. Now, she was the head of the national organization called SHRM, and some of you are probably familiar with SHRM. I was sitting in the back of the room, but as I always do, I take notes. Here's what the speaker did well. Here are the areas for improvement. Never thought I'd be sharing those notes with China Gorman. After the presentation was over, we were all ushered into the other room for coffee and dessert. And people were just hanging out, chilling after her presentation. And all of a sudden, I looked to my right, and there was China Gorman. She said hello, asked me to introduce myself and tell her what I did for a living. When I said I'm a presentation skills coach, she looked at me and said, please, do you have any feedback for me? At first, I hesitated. I didn't really know if I should tell her, but I could see her big open eyes and her leaning forward as if to say, I really mean it. And I did have two suggestions for her. One was to pause instead of saying, you know, all the time. And because she was a very petite lady and she was on a big stage, I suggested that she had more upright posture and use open, wide gestures because she was a little bent over. She thanked me and I stood there. I didn't know what to think. I was just floored. Well, that wasn't the end of the story. At the end of the event, I was hanging out with a friend in the lobby, and who appears? China Gorman. She came over and we must have chatted for 15 minutes. Now that happened many years ago, but I'll never forget China Gorman. I consider her, the term is a humble servant leader, no ego there. So we connect with people who are authentic, the kind of person you can say, I'd love to have a cup of coffee or have a beer or a glass of wine with that person. So don't try to be somebody else. Be authentic, be yourself, but be prepared. Any questions so far, Jimmy? Okay, now, all right. Now, the opposite of having the big ego is plain small. That's not good either. So when we look at this gentleman, Let's say he's our speaker. Right away, you're looking at the body language saying, oh my gosh. He's probably thinking to himself, I can't believe I'm the speaker. Why did they put me up here? Maybe they'll find out I really don't know what I'm talking about. Many of us have those thoughts, and the term for it is the imposter syndrome. It's the feeling that you don't really deserve to have that position or to be the speaker, and that someone will call you out on it and you'll be humiliated. You'll be called a fraud. Well, I have some good news for you. Most people have the imposter syndrome. A fellow coach I know, Jeff Watts, works with CEOs. He said every single one of the CEO clients he has the imposter syndrome. So don't feel badly about it. But what you do about it then is to be very, very well prepared. And remember, your playing small doesn't serve the world. As you let your own light shine, you indirectly give permission for others to do the same. This is a quote from Marianne Williamson, who's a very, very famous author. And I use this quote, I'm so glad I found it many years ago when I was teaching college classes. I want all of you to shine. We each have something very special that we need to share with the world. So feeling small is not the way to do that. What we need to do then is own our power. Often when I work with the coaching clients, this is the foundation of everything I do, is teach people how to own their power. Because my take is that only one person can own the power in the room, and I want it to be you. Here's a typical scenario. I remember working with many upper managers at FPL, used to do training there once a month, and often they present to their VPs. What would happen is they'd be so intimidated, they actually didn't do enough research before they went in, and the VPs would sense the weakness in them, their body language, their vocals, and they come in for the attack. Now, if you present a strong front, you're confident, you're well prepared, I think that they're less likely to attack you because, again, only one person can have the power in the room. Same thing is true if you're in a meeting and somebody's a heckler. My take on that is as well. If you put up a strong, confident front, that person is afraid of being ridiculed and less likely to attack you. So own your power. Very important. The other tools that I train people in are much easier after they learn how to own their power. Number 4, procrastination. And I want everyone here now to raise their hand if you've ever had a deadline. Let's say it's 2 weeks of time to prepare, and you've said, oh, I'll start tomorrow preparing. Raise your hand. I want to see those hands. Now, why do we do that? It makes no sense, because when we procrastinate, what we're doing is we're going to be suffering a lot more if we're putting it together, right? The day before. You can't possibly be as well prepared, as polished and rehearsed if you wait for the last minute. So I'm going to be telling you how the brain works and why we procrastinate, so you can cut that out. Here's the deal. The emotional brain brings us toward pleasure and away from pain. If you view preparing a presentation as painful, you will put it off. But again, we know that it ends up being a disaster. Some of us become very religious when we do that. Please, God, get me through this. I promise I won't do it again. Right? Not the time to find religion, okay? So I want to discourage you from doing that and encourage you to get started right away. That means day one. Now you might say, oh, Marsha, easy to say. Well, guess what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And in another few minutes, you'll get a great way to organize those points. Okay, I see people are still entering. Terrific. Welcome. All right, any questions, Jimmy?
No questions. Just one from Regina. She says, so true. Thank you, Marsha. Preparation is such an important reminder, and she needed that today.
But remember, it's more painful at the end. Oh, another thing I want to bring out with that. When you start early, the universe provides. That means you will wake up with great ideas. I call that outsourcing. So while you're sleeping, your brain is still working. But it's like the universe says, sorry, buddy, I'm not helping you. You waited for the last minute. But when you start early, it's amazing. You'll even hear things around you, something from a TV show, radio, whatever, podcast that you can put into the presentation, right? Do you think I just put this together last night? I started at least 2 weeks ago. So a lot of moving parts, especially when you're doing a webinar. So again, I'm going to give you an easy format. So we'll take the pain away, and I'm going to give you pleasure today, okay? All right. Number 5, knowing little about your audience. Big mistake. We know about t-shirts that are one size fits all, but that's definitely not true with presentations, right? Think about that. If you gave the same presentation to, let's say, entry-level employees as you did to upper management, do you really think you'd be successful? Absolutely not. So before you even put a word down, before you do your writing, you have to be a bit of a detective. And here are just a few of the questions you would want the answers to in order to be successful the day of the presentation. Again, what are the positions of the people who will be in your audience? Also, maybe you want to find out age, gender. If you're speaking, say, all women, all men, sometimes we use different stories and examples, and perhaps a different vocabulary as well. And then what challenges or fears do those audience members have? Now, with COVID, supply chain issues, possibly inflation going up, we have a lot of challenges and fears. So if your presentation can help your audience address and deal with some of those, that would be great. But you need to be aware of all of those. And then lastly, I have what is their prior knowledge on the topic. If you speak below their level, they'll be very insulted. And if you speak above it, they're going to be confused. So this is why we need to do our research, be a bit of a detective before we even put one word to paper or on your computer monitor. I'll pause now. Any questions, Jimmy?
Still no questions.
No questions. All right, that's fine. No problem. Number 6, weak organization. I'm often called into companies because they have so many people wasting time putting together presentations where they're covering so much information and it's totally disorganized. So as an example, I had worked with American Express engineers recently. So think about it, these were upper level senior managers, directors I was working with, and they're presenting to VPs. So think about the time and money that is being wasted if they show up with too much information instead of catering it to the needs, the wants, the time restraints of that audience. And we have structured minds. Everything we do, think about all the habits we have. As an example, when you get up first thing in the morning, chances are you do the same thing first every day, whether it's use the restroom, brush your teeth, wash your face. We are creatures of habit, and our brains work in a structured, organized format. Very important. So keep in mind, if your audience is confused, you lose. And sometimes it's big time. It could be humiliating for somebody to have the executive say to people, what is this? I didn't ask for that. That's too much information. I didn't need all that. So what do we do then? We try to organize our information. People want to be in a state of balance. They really do not want to be confused because, first of all, we have short attention spans. It's so easy if you've now turned off your audience members, right, for the audience to take their phones. So we don't want to do that. So here's an easy way of getting started. Day 1. Let's assume you have 2 weeks. We don't always have the benefit of that, but let's assume it's 2 weeks for a minute. Every speech should have opening comments and closing. That's not where we start writing, okay? Do not do that. It sounds a little contradictory, but trust me, there's a system to it. We want to look at our main points, but before I can come up with my main points, I need to think, all right, what is a 1-sentence summary of my speech? It can be called a thesis statement. Let me come up with an example. Okay, 3 ways that our company can become more environmentally responsible are to bring in our own mugs for coffee, to have a recycling bin for our plastic water bottles, and to make the temperature 72 instead of 65. So that would be your thesis statement. And what would be your purpose? Is it just to inform people? I think in this case, it would be to persuade them. So at the end of the speech, I hope to persuade my audience members to adopt these measures for our company to become more environmentally sensitive. So you have to know if it's informing, persuading, or maybe just motivating. So if on day one, you just wrote down your thesis statement, what you hope to accomplish at the end, again, whether to inform, persuade, or motivate, and you just wrote out one sentence for each of your main points, you'd be feeling great. You'd get that hit of dopamine, which is a feel-good chemical, right? It's not dope. Dopamine is a natural chemical that we release in our bodies when we have pleasure. So now you see day one, you're already getting that hit of pleasure. You're going to be motivated to keep working on it a little bit each day. And depending on your schedule, you might even go back to it day one because you like that feeling of feeling good. All right. And smiling, by the way, gives you dopamine as well. So having a very structured format is super important to making sure the audience follows along. In between each main point, you should have a transition statement. It's not just dumping three things. You have a nice transition statement that will lead the audience from main point 1 to main point 2 and from 2 to 3. After you've done that, I can guarantee you'll come up with some ideas for perhaps a nice opening, an attention grabber. So don't worry about the intro and the conclusion at this point. Just get your thesis statement, your purpose, and your 3 main points right now. Later on, you'll go back, you'll put in more detail and perhaps do some research. So simple and easy. I want you to have pleasure, not pain. Mistake number 7 is making excuses. Look at this woman right away. Look at her body language. Like, oh my God. I've been in the audience sometimes and I've heard people say things like, oh, I was stuck in traffic. Oh, I'm frazzled. Oh my God, my kids kept me up last night. I hardly got any sleep. I really didn't have enough time to prepare. So I don't know. I'll try to do my best. Oh, I'm not feeling well today. Please be kind. Please be understanding. Right. And so what happens is you're already giving people a negative first impression. I remember years ago going to one of the National Speaker Association conventions, and someone was relating to us that he was booked at a conference. These conferences are planned a year in advance. So he was booked as a speaker, and the day before the conference, he got really sick. But there was no way to cancel the day before. Absolutely no way. You couldn't even call another speaker. That speaker would need at least a few days to travel to be prepared. So because he took his responsibility seriously, he gave an amazing presentation. How do you do that? By giving total focus to your audience, your message, changing their lives in some way. And it's amazing what you can do when you focus on one thing at a time. He said after he was done, checked himself into the emergency room, but by golly, he did a great job. So you've heard of the no-fly zone, we're in the no excuse zone. No excuses. Do the very best you can that day. Nobody needs to know your personal business. Number 8, a poor first impression. I know we have a few real estate people on the line today, but everybody can relate to this example. You are getting your home ready to be sold. The realtor calls you up and says, I've got a couple coming, they're very serious buyers. They walk into your home and they see this, right? Would that be a positive first impression? I don't think so. There are 2 things that are irretrievable: time and that first impression. So why is that true? Here's the deal. It gets back to the way we're wired. For survival, primitive man walking the plains, coming upon someone from another tribe, had to make a decision in 2 seconds, friend or foe, in order to move toward the person or run like crazy or be prepared to fight. So we still do that. We still have the same wiring, very quick to make a decision. When you're a presenter, I feel there are 2 important places to make that impression. As soon as you open your mouth and at the end of the introduction, People are then making a decision whether or not they will continue to listen to you. Here's another thing about human nature, and I find this fascinating. Once we have made up our minds, it's very unlikely we're going to change them. The term in social psychology is called belief perseverance. Write that down. Belief perseverance. We've all probably shared this and experienced that with friends of ours who have very different ideas politically, right? So what belief perseverance means, we will cling on to our beliefs no matter what, even in the face of contradictory information. Once we have an opinion, we don't want to prove ourselves wrong. So now let's take this back to the public speaking arena. It really makes sense to invest in an awesome opening, because if right away people go, oh my gosh, oh, Jimmy, he's fabulous, right? Well, they don't want to prove themselves wrong. And chances are when Jimmy makes some little mistakes that we all do, they won't even notice it because they really like Jimmy and they don't want to prove themselves wrong. But if we start off and we're weak, fiddling with our notes, body language is down, not making eye contact, it's too easy for people to make a poor first impression of us. And it's really hard to change that. So remember that first impressions really do count. And belief perseverance. We have to understand the human psychology, human behavior. So as speakers, we have to understand how people are thinking. It's not just about our words. It's about our audience, their attitude, and what they're thinking. Number 9, a dull, boring delivery. Raise your hand if you've ever been at a 10-minute presentation that seemed more like 2 hours. Raise your hand if you've ever experienced that. All right, how about a 2-hour presentation that seemed more like 10 minutes? So what was the difference between the two? All right, so we have now a very boring speaker and a very engaging speaker, because time goes quickly when you're engaged and you're having fun. What can we do then to make sure we do not have a dull delivery? Also keep in mind, it goes with all the other points I've made. People make decisions quickly. So in the first 30 seconds or so, if they don't feel pulled in, if it's dull, if it's a boring monotone, they'll pull out their phones, okay? So we have to be part entertainer in a way when we're a speaker. I'll offer you 2 different areas today. I go into a lot more depth, by the way, on all this information in my online speaking course called Speaking Success Without the Stress. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Vocal variety entails about 7 different components, but the one I'll share with you today is having an expressive voice. So it's a voice that is melodic. It really pulls you in and you want to listen to it. The opposite of that is speaking in a monotone. And of course, that's dull and boring and people will tune out. You can actually record your voice, listen to it. Now it's going to be painful, I have to tell you. But then you'll say, okay, is my voice dull? Is it expressive? And then keep changing the vocals. Perhaps a little bit louder, a little bit softer, word emphasis, lots of things we could do. Reading poetry, children's books are good ways of adding vocal variety to our voices. And that helps prevent that dull delivery. People want to be engaged. They don't want to be a one-way boring delivery. What we can do is ask a question. All right, so let me do that now. By a show of hands, how many of you had to rearrange your schedules to be here today? Anybody would rearrange their schedules to arrange that? Okay, by a show of hands. All right, I see just a few. Okay, good. All right, now be careful when you ask a question though. It can't be this open-ended long question because it will take up half your speaking time, right? A short question, yes or no, show of hands. All right, and be careful that it's something that's easily understood. So my suggestion is once you have the presentation ready, Do it in front of some of your peers because you'll get some feedback from them as well. That helps a lot. That's one way of engaging, and is by asking a question and then telling a story. Obviously, I don't want you to tell a Dr. Seuss story. The best stories are the ones from your own experience. Years ago in training, I used to share an experience that I had when I was a runner. I was a very slow runner, and everyone else had finished. And I just wanted to stop. It was 6.2 miles, and I just wanted to stop at 6.1. But my brother-in-law encouraged me to finish because the family was waiting at the finish line. And so when I tell this live, there's a lot more detail, but the idea being, as a speaker, do you stop sometimes at 6.1? When you get to the conclusion, does your voice go down? Does your energy go down? Do you start having less eye contact with the audience? No, I want you to make it across the finish line at 6.2. Again, that's just a very brief example of including a story in your presentations. People love stories. It can also be a story about a happy client. And lastly, I have a startling statistic. Here's an example, quoted from Forbes. Out of the 500 Fortune 500 companies, only 7.4% have female CEOs. All right, so that would be an especially effective statistic if I'm speaking, say, at a women's conference. And you can find statistics very easily online. There's so much information you can get. You need an idea. Sometimes you just type in that word and a bazillion things will come up for you. Okay, I guess we're getting to number 10 then. No questions? I want to make sure before I go on. Jimmy, no more questions? No? Okay. The last one is slides that turn off the audience. Now look at this slide. This is actually supplied to me from one of my clients, right? Look how busy it is. Now I have a rule. It's called the $5 rule. I made this up years ago. If you have to pay $5 for every word or every number on that slide, which words stay and which go away? And people seem to like that little rhyme. So everybody say that. Which words stay and which go away? Let's go back and look at that slide. Wow, about how much money, type in the chat about how much you think it would cost you for that slide at $5 a word. All right. Years ago, I remember telling my college students about this, and one young lady aptly raised her hand. She said, I'm going to become very cheap. And I said, good for you, good for you. That's what we want. Here's an example of a slide. Oh, before I get to that, again about the brain. We're wired to think visually. And this also goes back to primitive man, right? Because we didn't have words so that 8,000 or 9,000 years ago. So we're used to processing the world mainly visually. And what's interesting is that the part of our brain that pictures things is the same part of the brain that actually sees and hears. So the brain does not know the difference between reality and what you visualize. This is a very effective tool, especially in persuasion. If you're trying to ask your superiors for additional funding, perhaps they need more personnel, get them to picture how much better the future will be, how much more efficient the organization will operate once they make that investment. We process information and we remember it visually. Stories are a great way of doing that as well because they are very visual the more you get into the description, right? So if I were telling the full story about the running, I describe what I was wearing that day, what the sounds were, what the sights were. I would exaggerate the pain, the cramps that I did have. My brother's voice coming out to say, where were you? I finished half an hour ago. All right, so here's some examples of a plain, boring slide, again, provided to me by one of a major corporation. The name will remain anonymous. So we have a title and we have 3 bullet points. Boring. Now I turned it around into something more visual. Here we have the title, Benefits of Virtual Training. And then I took each of the 3 points and put it into an oval with an appropriate picture. and I condense the number of words. I'm using now the tool to animate. I use Fade. There are lots of tools in your animation, but pretty simple to construct something like this, far more visual and engaging. I also like the idea of bringing in one at a time. So what if I wanted to discuss this in more detail, perhaps offer some numbers? Then people could focus just on that. Even though this is not a busy slide, I'd rather have the audience focus on one thing at a time than to even take in 3 at a time, as visual as this is. Hopefully now you'll know how to make slides more visually appealing, how important it is. Remember, think visually first. The less information you have, the better. And remember the $5 rule. How many of you have sat through? Give me a thumbs up if you've ever sat through a presentation that had too many words, too many numbers on it. Give me a thumbs up. Okay. I see that Sheila, Jimmy have, Amy, Kathleen. Okay. I'm sure at some point all of us have. And to make it even worse, I remember many years ago being at a workshop. It was one of the ATD groups, and we had a guest speaker. And he had so many words on his slide that he turned around to read them. He said, "It's probably too small. I'll have to read it to you." Oh, at that point, I was in so much pain. It was a terrible experience, right? Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed these 10 mistakes. I hope you took notes. Here's the list. If you want to take a picture of that, I'm happy to leave it up there. So these are the 10 mistakes speakers make. What I'd like you to do is put into the chat, after you look them over, what's the top one, the one that really resonated with you in this list. So I'll wait for everyone to put in the chat their favorite one that resonated with them.
So we're getting a lot of different answers. We're getting procrastination a number of times, a few feeling smalls, slides turn off the audience, weak organization. Looks like playing small and procrastination are coming up a lot.
Really? Okay. Good. Well, thank you so much for participating. Terrific. Okay, great, guys. I hope you learned a lot today. As I mentioned earlier, there were a couple of offers. I'm very proud to have created during COVID, I created an online course. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I like to think I put the best of my tips, techniques, and tools into this course. It's called Speaking Success Without the Stress. It includes 5 modules, and it includes half an hour of coaching. The people who have taken it just love it. It's very interactive. We've got videos, additional resources for you as well. You can take it at your own pace for 30 days. Now, if you go to the website, and Jimmy will be putting in the chat, so you can just copy and paste that. If you go to the site for the course, speakingforsuccess.mykajabi.com, you'll see all the information. I don't want to keep you guys too long giving you every detail. You can read that yourself. At the bottom of the page, you'll see the course with a half an hour on the bottom left. The full price with half-hour coaching is only $179. Half an hour of my coaching alone is $150, a great bargain. But today, I'm going to give you a special of $20 off. So when you get to the checkout, just put in the code SAVE20, and that will save you $20. The other offer is this. If you feel I'm not ready to take the full course yet, Marsha, thank you for the offer. I'd like to start off slowly. That's fine. I respect that. What I did was I pulled out the first module. The first module is all about developing your confidence and owning your power. It also comes with my welcome video, a pre-course assessment, and that's only $29. This is not on the program page though, so please copy that link, the bit.ly link, because I created a special page just for that course. It is not on the website. It is not available to anybody except those who are on the webinar. All right, so please take down that information. and hope that some of you will take advantage of that opportunity. Great opportunity.
Marsha, I've put in the information there for those two offers. I also have a question when you're ready. So let me know when you're ready to take a question and we'll open it up for everyone else. But the information on the two offers is already in there. And I'm also going to enter your contact information right now.
Terrific. So please, if you have a question after today, feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you. You have my cell number and my two websites. All right, so go ahead, Jimmy. I'm ready for questions.
All right, so the question was, and this is a really good question. I love it. During your speech, how do you discreetly scan your audience to gauge whether they are attentive to your speech?
Yes. Well, when you're talking about virtual or live, you're talking probably about the virtual. The virtual is challenging. So I'll occasionally go through the gallery. We encourage people to keep their video on. That usually keeps them more engaged. And by asking them to do a thumbs up, comments in the chat, polls, there are lots of ways of keeping the audience's attention up. And it's mainly that you have great information and you're excited to share it with people.
Yeah, I imagine it would be really hard to do with having 20 plus people in a virtual room.
Right. But I see the most.
So really well done today. I am curious though, how do you do that in a live situation?
Oh, well, you know what? This to me is when you have to have great energy. So when you're doing this virtual, in a way, you need a little bit more because it's not the same when you're in the room. But I always feel if I come in, I've had a good night's sleep, I'm anxious, I'm passionate about what I do for a living. So people always comment that I'm high energy. People feel that I really care about them and I want to make a difference in their lives. And by asking questions and going around the room. So that part is easier live, truthfully, because you're looking people in the eye. Yeah. You are. So that is a little bit easier live, but we have to accept the fact that Zoom is here to stay. And before you get on a Zoom call, by the way, make sure you've had food. Don't go on an empty stomach, right? And you have to really get yourself in a really upbeat frame of mind before you sit down, especially if you tend to not be an extrovert as I am. You've got to do some things to energize yourself or you may lose your audience.
Sure, makes a lot of sense. I have another question if you want to take another one.
Well, I had actually a couple of questions before I do that, would send in beforehand. So I want to make sure I get to those too. Regina had asked, what's something important that I've learned over the years teaching public speaking? And I think it's to really be yourself, be humble and really have fun. That's what it's all about. I love what I do. I'm always having fun. This to me is not work. And then Sue K had said, what do you do about the jitters before you speak? Well, I have lots of ideas. A lot of them are in the course, but one I'll tell you that's a lot of fun. It's called the silent primal scream. And you would stand up to do this in an upright position. You would put your arms in the air and go. You're not going to let out a sound unless you're alone. And when you do that, I'm seated now, so it's not as effective. You're standing with your arms in the air. What happens is you're releasing all the tension that you may have inside of you. All right. And then you start laughing because you feel very silly, but that's good. When you're laughing, you're releasing dopamine as well. All right, Jimmy, go ahead. I wanted to make sure I respect the fact that those people.
So I do have the one more question, but before we do that, before anybody hurries up and jumps off, although we could stay here all day, I do want to let everybody know, save the chat because there's information in there. There's info from your colleagues that joined here today. And I also put the 10 tips in there as well. And you want to make sure you have Marsha's contact information and those offers. So if you didn't get a chance to copy and paste it, you can save the whole chat by clicking right next to the smiley face in the chat area where you type. There's 3 little dots, the ellipsis. Tap that and then hit save chat, and then you'll be able to save the chat. It comes up in a big notepad document, and you can do that so you can refer to it. So the last question is, what is the most satisfying part of your job as a trainer and coach?
I'm so glad that question came up. It's really making a difference in people's lives. I remember one gal from FPL who was scared to death when she took my workshop, and she wrote me 2 weeks later when she had a big presentation in front of the VPs, And she told me that it went really, really well. When she was done, she said, I was so happy I could cry. And that just touched me so much. And then when I help people who are feeling weak and insecure, an example was a recent coaching client of mine, an attorney, and he had to go into these hearings with older, more experienced attorneys, and he felt intimidated. By showing him how to own his power, he said it changed his life. I mean, that was an awesome quote. So really helping people to really be the best they could be. That's why my tagline is changing the world one presentation at a time.
Perfect. Well, if there's no more questions, I appreciate everyone coming in today. We want to respect your time. I know we're just a few minutes ahead there. So we're all good. Marsha, that was amazing. Thank you so much for allowing us to get a little bit of what's going on in your brain as a trainer and a coach and a public speaker. Fantastic as always. Everyone, thank you so much for your time today. And Marsha, any last word?
Yes, absolutely. I do appreciate everybody who's in attendance today. The tagline of my company is changing the world one presentation at a time. So I hope today you've learned some valuable information that will help to improve the way you think about and deliver those presentations. So wishing you lots of success.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.